And a very good day to you and welcome to Conversation Oasis. This is a free-flow conversation program which comes to you every week from the Kasviskeidas restaurant here in the centre of Turku. I'm your host David Mawby for today's program, and joining me is Jala, who is our host here. He runs the place here, and I'm also joined by Branko, and you're studying at Åbo Academy.
Yes.
And studying philosophy. So I think we're going to have a rather interesting discussion here because, Jala, I think you wish to start us off today.
Oh, well, I just came up with a topic that is good to talk about. Why are we afraid of changes, or we are afraid in general? What makes us panic or fear?
I think that's a very topical question because I find these days, as autumn creeps on, a propensity to have very small anxiety attacks. But maybe I should sort of talk to a doctor rather than the group here. But yes, why do people fear change? We are creatures of habit, aren't we?
Yes.
Branko, any thoughts on this?
Well, there's a certain aspect of there's a lack of knowledge about the future, for example, that we don't know what's going to happen, and we are not comfortable in our own ability to handle the future, whatever it brings, and whatever the unknown brings, and so there's a certain
But can I point out one thing in here, that changes means that somehow we have to replace our old habit with something new. And why can't we forget about the old habits? Why it's so difficult to stop all traditions we have, for example? Like, if somebody tell you today, David, that you have a birthday coming, and then you have to make a party, and you have to arrange a lot of things and invite people to your birthday party, but somebody tell you forget about it. And you say, no, it's not possible, everybody knows and everybody expects me to do this. Or you go somewhere to a party, a birthday party, you have to buy a gift, but somebody tell you, stop it, you don't need to buy a gift. Why is so difficult to forget about these traditions we have?
Because we inherit them. We inherit them from our parents, who have inherited from their parents, and when this happens throughout society, of course, this becomes part of the cultural tradition. Though I've noticed with birthdays, especially when you reach the terrible birthdays of 50 and 60, that you can always say that you're travelling and get out of it that way. And I think in the old days in newspapers, when people used to announce that they were 50 or 60, they would put matkoilla in the paper, or in Swedish you could tell me what that is, bortrest, I think. It was that's how you got out of it.
In the end, we do accept the changes, but we are resisting to accept. We didn't know that cars, and we were using horses or donkeys.
Yeah.
But then in the end, we stopped them, and now we have cars, and tomorrow probably some other vehicle. But still, we resist to accept them as long as they are not really public or they are not norm. So why is that?
Well, I think that can be extended also to energy sources and also to modes of transport. Wouldn't it be lovely if we all had electric cars instead of these awful smelly gas guzzlers that pollute our streets? But I think we have to take this back to a basic fact of human existence, is that not more than 50, let alone 100 years ago, we were born in the same village, we lived in that village or town all our lives, and we died in that village as well. So the idea of change has only been brought about by the urbanization of society, where people have to move from one town to another, maybe in search of work, for instance, or for another reason. And therefore, adaptation to change becomes essential, whereas maybe 100 years ago, adaptation to change was was not considered important, unless, of course, you had a tyrannic ruler, and then you didn't have much option, if you're an ordinary person, to change the way you were ruled in society.
Yeah, but
Yeah, that's the point I was getting into, that habit creates, it gives us a certain bit of knowledge about, our expectancies of the future, or our expectations of what's going to happen when I do a certain thing in my life, like get a new apartment, for example.
It's a little bit about security. What we have done, even that we know the time for that is over, but we know about it and we are used to it, it gives us security.
Yeah.
But the thing that we are going to do, we don't know enough about it, and we are a little bit stressed about it. So it doesn't in the end feels us secure. I remember in India there was no public toilet, and then there was some. And I remember still beside the public toilet, people were lining up beside the wall, that peeing on the wall. But it's just, I think, historical human was mostly about genetic and habit and how we were educated. But now people are becoming more informed and knowledgeable, and they should be more aware of their time being, and what is requiring to update their modern culture, their modern life, and how to make it easier for themselves to live with it. So that's why I'm trying in here also to make some discussion, to bring up some discussion about cultural changes that we need today.
That's once again what I was getting into, is that we can certainly make a habit out of change, but of course that's going to be hard, because change is always something different, but we can be comfortable in changing certain patterns in our life, and if we do it kind of repeatedly. Though of course it depends on what kind of changes we are talking about. For example, the apartment thing, that we can get used to moving, when moving can certainly be scary if you're not used to it, and yeah.
Though I think also it's good to try changing rooms in an apartment. If you have 3 rooms, then you can change the bedrooms round, and you can sort of do all sorts of things just to. And I've found that exercise to be quite sort of a lively thing, and also the results to be quite enlightening. I think the whole concept of it changes, and I think this is, Jalal, what you're alluding to, is that today, like never before, we face change big time.
It's faster and faster all the time happening.
Not only a question of how fast life is, but with climate change, which is nature's way of saying to us, you can't go on in this way, you've got to change for the better.
I've seen here people a lot to talk about, for example, that global warming, and how we should stop this using our resources and what we do as consuming. But still, and people know that the new life is about moving from one flat to another, from one city to another, or from one country to, but still they continue collecting furniture, stuff at home, and every 3-4 years they want to change their flat or home, and then they have to carry all these things, and then they have a terrible task to get rid of many of them.
Yes, especially if you have a collection of vinyl records. I can tell you from experience how backbreaking that can be, not to mention a big collection of books as well. So it's best to, in one way, it's best to stay in the same place, but it doesn't always make for an exciting life.
It's not the best to stay in one place. The best is just to minimize your consuming and by shopping. Yeah.
Which, of course, in today's society is next to impossible. But it also begs the question of just how sustainable are our modern habits. For instance, the whole concept of you're born, you consume, you die.
Well, there was this very interesting seminar that Rupert Reed held. He is a philosophy researcher from England, I believe. But anyway, he talked about global warming, and basically his whole point was we're headed to disaster, and that's largely because there's a lack of this kind of collective mindset that we're particularly in the Western world, and we like to think very individualistically, and that can be a huge problem if we're too individualistic, and we only think about ourselves and our own habits, and I mean we have to kind of think in a global aspect, and what are we doing in the world,
and I don't see much in the media, which is controlled by the elite, pointing us in a better direction, and I wonder why, because those in the elite surely know what the problems are, but is it a fact that because they live in such a darn comfortable way they couldn't give a damn what happens?
But then it's not just these things, then there is the other aspect of the modern life that we are afraid. The advertising makes us to believe that we need things, that we don't need them in actual life. And that's where I come with another changes in legislation. We should have legislation of advertising. If you advertise anything and there is no quality, you are going to be fined. You know.
You mean if the product itself is rubbish?
Yeah, it's rubbish, and it's not useful, or it's not really remaining as good product for a little bit longer time.
Yes, or if the advertising itself is misleading. I was confronted with an example of this not just more than a few hours ago, when a department store in this city said that buy 3 and pay for 2. So I got a pack of what I was going to buy, and there were three of the same items in the pack. I said, I'm only going to pay for 2 because your advertisement. Oh no, you have to buy 3 packs of 3, and then we'll give you the third one free. So you can guess it was socks. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And it was misleading.
It's misleading. Yes. There are a lot of, like there are nowadays. They say that they want this free product, they send you email, or they say, and then once you apply for that free product, then they send you another product with a bill, and then you want to stop it, you call there, but they don't accept it so easily. They send you again.
It happens with all sorts of things. I think
we need a new legislation.
We need new legislation, but we need leadership as well, because I think that the world, our planet, faces such great changes which will force every single one of us to adapt, to change. But this leadership is so sorely lacking in the West. If it's apparent anywhere that one has to change one's habits, it seems to me very much a grassroots movement that has sprung up, starting first with the Green Movement, which now seems to have dissipated into the mainstream of politics. We need other grassroots, which we try to feature on this program, for instance. But it's not enough. We need power which comes down the dreaded pyramid to the whole population via the mainstreaming, and say, look, we can't go on like this. I'm reminded, if I just go on for a second, that in the days of stagnation in the Soviet Union, when Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in Russia, the first thing he said when he took over was, we can't go on living like this. And he strived for change. What was the result? The Soviet Union collapsed.
I don't call it collapse. They call it collapse, but I call it reforming. Because it's still there. In a different with different politics and
that's right.
potential. But here I think I come with the idea that I always say, for any job we need education, even for cleaning.
Yes.
But the most responsible job is to educate children, but we don't need any education for it. I say no, we need good quality courses for parenting. We don't have this.
No.
And please don't educate them as you educate them for different type, for different quality, culture, values, and for the future. Don't grow them as who you are.
But that goes into it. That's a wider subject of parenting, of which I'm certainly not a successful example. But I think we need to address in society the fact that it is absolutely essential that change is coming, change is now. And not tomorrow, it has to happen now. And I suppose in some ways you see more very timid steps towards recycling. We've just had 2 boxes arrive in front of our house for plastic rubbish. And yet the dangers of plastic have been known for many years now.
We have a lot of these plastics rubbish in politics too. But I say that stop criticizing, but just understand the nature of things, and then see what we can do about it. Like Trump, okay?
Yeah.
Trump for me is not somebody that I should make fun or criticize, but I say that Trump is there to show us what is wrong with politics. We should have a reform. We should have something done about politics.
Okay, Branko, you're on the left of politics. How do you react to that? Trump is showing us what's wrong with politics. Do you go along with that?
I would say so, yes, but Trump is certainly a symptom of the problem, but then again the problem is bigger than Trump is, and it's of course partly education and information and the media and etc. And the way people talk and think about politics, for example, and it's not widely enough talked about in a positive sense,
yes.
because politics should be something for everyone, and for everyone to practice, for everyone to think about, because politics is everything in society, and we are all part of society, and so Trump is certainly a symptom of political ignorance, but he's just a symptom. It's the political ignorance that is the problem. And
but he'd said today that people don't want to go into politics because they're scared the media are going to fry them alive in one form or another, and that it's the scrutiny that if you go into politics there, you have to be, and I'm not making a racial distinction here, you have to be whiter than white, like some detergent advertisement.
I think media is a part of politics nowadays, and
regrettably, yes.
Yeah, media is using politics to make money, to stay in power and control people's mind, to brainwash them.
Yeah, and that's why I can't understand why mainstream media is not put any more to good use to get people to think more, to have a greater sense of environmental awareness. I find that to be something.
Because they don't see any benefit in that for them. So that's a lack of education again. They need to be more or well educated to see that in the end there is benefit in that, not in capitalism or in Trump.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we can tie this political discussion back to of course global warming is political, but also although it's a natural problem, but we can tie this back to the global warming discussion, because it's also a lack of kind of this global perspective that political is about everyone, that we're not thinking collectively enough, and there's how would I say this? Now I have blackout.
I should
But
you're doing well. You're doing well. Yes.
global warming is very much, but it's very difficult to say that how much it depends on just natural effect or how much is our human activities. But I think the pollution is definitely is about human activity.
Yes.
And having a big impact on global warming, which is in the end affecting human society. Because recently I was watching a documentary how pollution, the CO2 in
Carbon dioxide.
carbon dioxide was helping in America, in United States, crime rise up in middle after 70s, in the middle 80s and 90s, crimes were rising up just because of pollution, and it's like affecting human brain.
Yeah, that was what I was going to say, is that, well, like ties in with what you said, that people are certainly doing things, and in some countries the government is doing more. Like, for example, in France, the stores are not allowed to sell plastic anymore. But anyway, people are certainly doing things, and many governments are certainly doing things, and politicians are doing things. But are we doing enough? Is the big question, and that's something where everyone has to ask themselves: are we doing enough? Are we talking about this problem enough?
And to be fair, to give one example from the mainstream medium, in the UK, Sky News, which is run more or less by the Murdoch empire, ran a big campaign of awareness on the plastic mess in the oceans, and how we should boycott even. I think one participant said boycott the use of single-use plastic containers. Now I'd like to see that happen in those countries which border the Atlantic. Every time I go down to Spain or Portugal, I see plastic litter strewn all over the place, and wonder why on earth there has been very little education to stop people throwing plastic which goes directly into the Atlantic.
But this is very much related to these big megacities we have made for us, and megacities culture is. Instead of all the time talking about independence, like Catalonia, Kurdistan, Belgium, Italy, north of Italy, or in some states in the United States, we need smaller community, not independence. And I think in a smaller city, we have more resources to take care of our city, and also more people become informed about their own environment, and they care more. When it's so big, so you don't feel that you belong to that place.
You feel there's a sense of hopelessness that the world is too big for you. What can little old me do about it? I think you're absolutely right. So in a way, that this is the reason why there have been these grassroots movements springing up. We have the latest, animal rights parties, for instance, here in Turku, and other associated black-green groups, for instance. But whether they can actually do enough, I don't know. I still see people throwing litter on the streets, not only in Finland, but in the UK, everywhere you go. You still see people who are not aware of the fact that, hey, no, this is not a good idea if all this rubbish blows into the Atlantic or the Pacific, and then gets back to us through the food chains and gives us more higher incidences of cancer, for instance.
Good example. Here and wherever you go, I think in small cities or small places you find it more cleaner, more friendly environment and less crime, and in bigger cities people say that what can I do?
Yeah, and also we have to remember that people have to make ends meet. on very low budgets as well, which of course is the main concern. Where am I going to? For many people in the world, is where am I going to get my next meal for myself and for my family? So, have we come anywhere in over 26 minutes of discussing change?
Yeah, I think so.
No,
well, basically, we have to at least try to change because it's necessary to change. If we're talking about global warming, or if we're talking about personal things in life, that we have to get.
I
say that stop victimizing yourself, stop being afraid, and do something about your life.
Yes, I think that's. I think we could almost end on those words. Don't think about doing it. Just do it.
Yeah, just
don't
do
mourn,
it.
organize, as a Swedish Prime Minister once said many decades ago. Final word to you, Branko.
Don't be afraid of change and be politically active. You can make a change in society and life in general.
And that's about it for this edition of Conversation Oasis, which is our weekly discussion program. I've been your host, David Mawby. I've been joined by Branko, a student from Åbo Academy, a student of philosophy, and to our kind host here, who always provides the good tea and coffee every time we have this program here in the Kasviskeidas restaurant here in the centre of Turku city. We'll be back next week at these same times with another edition of Conservation, I said, didn't I?
Thanks to you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Conversation Oasis. Bye.
Bye.